Okay, we will open City Council work session for Wednesday, June 8th. And approval of the agenda.
So move.
Second?
All in favor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start every meeting with our public comment phase. So if there's anybody who would like to make a comment in the house or on Zoom, just raise your hand. And not seeing anybody. Go straight to our topic. Okay. I'm excited. Bruce, do you want to introduce?
Sure. This is several people, I'm sorry, everybody here is aware that we've been having community outreach events, which I can finally say without having to ask you, what does COA mean again? And there's been a really good response and been really pleased with the way that CETA has handled the work and the meetings and the enthusiasm that they're showing. And so we have Dustin, what's your last name? Johnson. I only call him Dustin. Yeah, Dustin Johnson, and he's the, pretty much the project architect on this. And then Jennifer Beatty is the principal of the firm. And we agreed to be here tonight to talk about the results of the 3 community outreach events. Actually, and then we also had a meeting with the tribe, so. Okay.
I believe we also have 2 members, their team on Zoom.
Yeah, so Kelly Douglas, who works directly with me, she's on right now, and Joyce Jackson, who's our landscape architect on the project, is on.
Good. Great. Thank you. Thank both of them for joining us. So, Jennifer, do you want to introduce us?
Not really, no, we can. I just want to say that we really appreciated everybody coming out to the different COE events and participating. And we were able to come into those events really without our intent was to not have any agenda, to not have any preconceived notion of what this site and building should look like, and really try to be a sponge for anybody that wanted to show up and talk. As we go through this presentation, as Dustin goes through this presentation, you're going to see that we had, lots of us spoke to multiple people. We tried to distill that information to make sure that one voice wasn't being louder than another voice, and that the same person being communicating with multiple of us, we gathered that together into one area. I think Dustin wants to run through what we prepared. There's a whole bunch of information. So at the end, we'll be happy to respond to any questions that you might have along the way.
And Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, but this will be available on the website. Is that correct?
Yes, is it on there now, Rusty?
I have the older version, but as soon as we're done with the meeting, I will get the one that Kelly said stop bringing up there.
Okay.
Yep.
And I ask because it's, I think in all about 125 pages, it's mostly of that 125 pages, about 110 of that is note taking at the various COEs and then the surveys that we received as well.
And
some
to
of this,
clarify that the note taking and the surveys, we redacted the name of the person so that that wouldn't be on everything.
the information is a little bit dense, so for some people, I think reading it rather than just hearing it could be beneficial.
Okay.
So we can start with our executive summary. If I can figure this out, Rusty.
There we go, full size. Now you should be just left and right should trans. That's really. There you go.
Perfect. Okay. So the executive summaries, it's a bunch of words. I'm not going to read through the entire thing for you, but I'll tell you what each section is about. So we've broken this up into our introduction as well as our methodology for how we collected and distilled the information, and then finally our findings and our recommendations. So the introduction talks about the various types of outreach events we've had. So we did 3 outreach events, general public. For those events, we had a separate outreach event specifically with members of the Clatsop Nehalem tribe. And our findings from both are incorporated in the graphics that we'll show you here in just a minute. Notes were taken in the form of, we would have various levels of our project team, not just CETA, but our consultants as well at these events. We would initially meet as a group. And then for the 2 events that were on site, and those were community outreach events 1 and 3, we then broke out into smaller groups and had one-on-one discussions. And those were where we're taking notes and then gathering them and comparing them in the office afterwards. COE number 2 was in a little bit of a different format. That one was not on site. That one was here in this building. That was held both virtually and in person. And Kelly, who is on Zoom right now, was our note taker for that one. So we always had dedicated note takers. And at the following day after each of these events, we would go back, type up our notes while they're fresh in our mind and move on to the next event. We did for the meeting with the tribal members, we met at the Chambers building. And we met with, it was approximately 10. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but Dick and Roberta Bash and Doug Dirk and we had just a very informative roundtable discussion with them. They also gave us some additional resources we've looked into and read or viewed. One of them was a movie. And have also been able to touch base with them via email, as well as they continue to participate in the community outreach events 1 and 2. So very good tribal participation throughout this process.
To
So that-
clarify, 1 and 3.
1 and 3.
They weren't here for number 2.
Mhm.
So that was the vehicle for talking to, gathering the general public and the tribe and speaking to them. The COEs were designed to be in slightly different formats. Again, 2 on-site, walking through the buildings in the site, 2 different times a day. One was on the weekend, one was during the week before Memorial Day weekend. And then COE 2 was the virtual and in-person format here and was more of a town hall type discussion. And the reason why we did that was to try to maximize the amount of public participation and representation that we would have at these. We'll talk a little bit about that more at our findings. So we can move into what did we do with this information? How did we process it? The first thing we did was we had somebody in our office take these notes after each of the design team members typed up their notes and sent them off to Kelly. Kelly was kind of our gatekeeper. She consolidated them and then we handed them off to a third party in the office who works on my team, but who is not familiar with the project. And his job was to go through and review all of the notes and to review all of the surveys and to start assigning each interest or concern given by each stakeholder a category. And at the end of that process, we would have a certain number of categories that these comments would then fit into. And that reminds me, in addition to the COE events, there were other methods of getting public representation. The survey was one. We had those available at each of the COEs. Anyone who was present could take those surveys themselves. They could also take copies of that survey home to family or neighbors or friends, have them fill it out. They could hand it to us in person. They could email it to us, fax it to us. And then the city created a website as well. And that website was created before the first COE event. And our notes get uploaded there and current information on the project is also there. So again, trying to maximize public representation, tribal representation, and have a real holistic view of the interests and concerns out there for this project.
The one thing I would say to what Dustin's talking about is the reason we chose the third party in our office is because each one of us might have heard emotions and heard pieces that, you know, are filled in blanks. And we wanted to have a more of a person that could take that and not bring their own interpretation into it. So it was a really clean way for us to make sure that we were getting the information on the survey or the information that we wrote in notes out into a clear and distilled fashion.
Right, we're all human. You know, we get out there, we're meeting and becoming familiar with Cannon Beach community members and it's a challenge not to start to develop, you know, your gravity towards any particular subject or start to hear things the way that you want to hear them. So having somebody third party who just isn't intimately familiar with the project do the sorting of the categories was important to us.
I thought it was interesting, the lengths that you would go to make sure you didn't start writing or drawing anything on a piece of paper. I heard duct tape referenced and things.
We have received a couple graphic representations and we say that's really great. We're not going to look at that right now. Thank you. So from what the building should look like, that's fabulous. We can look at that in a little bit, but not yet.
And we do reiterate that in the executive summary, these initial community outreach events during this phase of the project, not an opportunity to talk about design, but rather an opportunity to just listen, really listen and document what we've heard. So after categorizing, our third party on my team, after we went through and categorized everything, we were able to distill those categories into 9 primary categories. And those categories were community gathering space, education and workshop. We have miscellaneous in there that we'll talk about. Museum and exhibition, recreation, both on site and in the building. Site access and parking. That would include not just the amount of parking, but where parking may be located on the site and potential solutions to parking. Sustainability and nature, tribal heritage, and views and aesthetics.
And you might wonder why the order so random. We took that out of the hierarchy and put it in alphabetical order so that we would be looking at it strategically that way.
Miscellaneous catches a lot of the one-offs. We'll see it in the graphics. A lot of the concerns fell into the miscellaneous and led to us doing that graphic a little bit different. And once we get there, we'll talk about that. After that, we did not graph the information from that into a quantifiable graphic because, as Jennifer was alluding to before, we have several instances of stakeholders, and by design, who would go, COE number 1 is a good example. They would go around and talk to each one of, we were all wearing yellow vests, we were easy to find. So they'd go around and talk to each one of them. We were all taking the same notes. So if we were to graph that and show it and give it a magnitude, those who spoke the most would be represented the best. So the process of filtering is to collaborate with everyone who talked to the same people and start pulling out as best as we could all of the duplicates.
How did you know you were talking to the same people?
Oh, so a couple of things. We took people's names at the events. We wore name tags. We encouraged everyone else to wear name tags. So on our notes, we've redacted them for the purpose of this presentation and as it goes out for public record, but we had names for most of them. But also when you read through the notes, it's pretty apparent when you're talking to the same.
And it was good though. I mean, I think talking to multiple people, I don't want to discourage that because that was a good thing too, because what Dustin might have talked to someone about, I might have talked about that a little bit and we might have talked about something completely different. So we made sure that it wasn't like, okay, that person's talked twice. We're not going to take, we combined the notes to make sure that we were best illustrating their intent through, and lots of people actually from COE 1 to COE 3, their opinions somewhat migrated and changed. So that was really interesting to see the perspective move from one event to the next as things started, as we all started to talk about it.
And I would say that was even exacerbated by the folks who were at the COE events and then took a survey home with them and melded in, that they were able to really articulate beyond just standing there on a rainy day,
But to your
talk
point,
to each other.
there could be people that have, that wrote a survey without a name on it and someone that talked to us without a name on it, and they might get counted twice. And there's really, that's just, I think, the cost of doing business in this case. We did our best to make sure that everybody had the same voice.
So our first graphic, and we'll go to that one that I want to show you. Actually, we're going to step back. The first graphic is for categorizing. What we did for that. These are the 9 categories. Each one has an individual color. So our third party, if you will, employee that is not familiar with the project that went through with the notes, what he did was go through each of the concerns or interests or goals, every single note taken, every single stakeholder, and categorize them that way. So there's a visual representation. And the thing that did for us was to make sure that none of those got missed. As well as, you know, as he's doing this, as he's going through the notes, he's creating the list of categories. The next one was for filtering. So we take that information, we remove to the best of our ability all of the duplicates so that every stakeholder, regardless of how loud, how often, how persistent they were speaking, are on the same playing field as those who spoke quietly or once. And that's what this is. These colors relate back to the same colors that were used in the previous graphic. So it's the same categories. I point that out now because we have a one-off exhibit that doesn't follow that. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. So to do this graphic so that it was made a little bit more sense at first glance, we broke these out into subcategories. So we have 4 graphics that look like this. We call them Post-it notes for Post-it note programming. And the 4 subcategories we created to represent these 9 categories that everyone's goals or interests fell into are building vision, site vision, concerns, and proposed solutions. So they're grouped in kind of Tetris style, but every single one of those squares that you see represents a single stakeholder. There should be no duplicates. And again, we did the best that we could to make sure that there's not duplicates, but expect that there would be some degree of overlap. Site vision. You can see just by running through these that we had more notes from more people speaking about building vision than, say, the site, their goals and interests for the site. Concerns were about the same, and proposed solutions a little bit less. So primarily what we heard, according to this data and how it's organized, is related to the site or to the building, excuse me. So after the filtering phase is our prioritization. And prioritization is pretty simple for the sake of these graphics. After we take out the duplication of everyone, we narrow it down to one person per interest or concern. We've taken out that duplication. Now we can start to apply that. How many times was this particular comment or this particular category represented? And we can graph that, and that is an accurate representation of the percentage of people that spoke to that same item or similar items that fit in that same category. And the graphics that we have for that are simple pie charts. And again, these are broken out into the 4 subcategories of building visions, site vision, concerns, and proposed solutions. And again, the colors are consistent across all 3 graphics. They all go back to that first graphic as far as what category they fall into.
So I think it might be helpful just to kind of run through maybe the highest points on this one, and then as it goes down, like if you look at building vision. Just to kind of give it, because that's a little hard to read, I think, from parts in the room.
So taking the example of building visions. And again, this is statistical data. 23% talked about building being used as an event space. Whether it was positive or negative, they talked about the building being event space. 21%, a close second, talked about the building being used for indoor recreation. 14% for museum and exhibition, 10% for aesthetics and views. Aesthetics and views may be a little misleading when you read it. That is for primarily connection from the building to the estuary, as well as some concerns about the building looking over cars. And it also, aesthetics is also about what the building itself looks like and its prominence geographically when you come in on the north end of town. About 10% talked about kitchen space in that building. 7% community gathering space. This is its own category. It does not go into event space because this was specific to people talking about we don't have a place like this where our community can gather as Cannon Beach. With a couple of examples. So this was specific to locals being able to gather together. And then the miscellaneous is 7%. Site visions, the big hitters, site access and parking represented 22%.
And when we talk about that, there's, as he said, this kind of lumps a couple of things together. This lumps the people that want access or want parking and people that don't want parking. They're both talking about the same thing, so they get lumped together. That doesn't mean that they're holistically saying one or the other. They are marrying these two concepts of parking as a whole. Does it happen on site or does it not happen on site?
Okay, so site access and parking was our biggest one for site. That was about 22%. Recreation, and this would be site recreation, 14%. Tribal heritage, 12%, and this does include our conversations with the Clatsop Nehalem tribe in our first outreach session. Community gathering space, exterior, 12%. Sustainability and nature, 9%. And then again, aesthetics and views and event space were both talked about approximately the same at 8%. And again, the miscellaneous, 8%. Our next graphic is the one-off we talked about not following the color scheme. The reason is the pie chart would just be pink. These all fall into the miscellaneous category, 90% of them. So we gave it its own color scheme. We can go back to show you what those colors mean. They're in the bottom right-hand corner. So concerns were broken out into community concerns. And this may be a little misleading when you read that term. Again, this is locals versus anything else. So that the site and buildings will be used for local use. Funding and costs. How is this being funded? The limitations, where's the funding coming from? How much? Building design, health and safety, decision-making, sustainability, access and parking, building and site uses, and tribal history. So of those concerns, the big one was community concerns at 23%. Making sure that we as a community are going to be able to use this building, that it won't only be used for visitors. Funding and costs. These are largely questions. What is the budget for the project? Do we have enough to make our vision come true with the budget that we have? Where is that money coming from? Are we going to get more? Building design, 18%. This is where we're really tying our hands down, not to not to engage in design discussions, but there's certainly a lot of interest in how the building is going to look. And then access and parking, 11%. You've heard me say, and you'll continue to hear me say, that these are just statistics. But access and parking is something that we probably heard the loudest, or one of the loudest in terms of the concerns. Sustainability. That's pretty one-sided, that folks are concerned that it won't be designed in a sustainable way. Building and site uses. And decision-making. The integrity of this process that we're here exploring today. And then health and safety, 6%, tribal heritage, 2%. And then the proposed solutions. Yeah, you should be doing this here. Where's the so the proposed solutions, tribal heritage at 36%. A lot of folks talked about that, as well as community gathering space, sustainability in nature, and then event space down to 9%. It starts getting lesser and lesser from there. Site access and parking. This is another example of the best statistics. So site access and parking is only 6% on the proposed solutions. But again, there were a lot of folks who had some very strong ideas about how we can solve or potentially solve that problem. And then the last graphic that we wanted to show you was an overall pie chart, which is we've combined all these together so that you can really see of the comments that we got, how much of them were concerns. And the concerns up there have that diagonal red hatch. It's kind of hard to see even from here. And that's only 2, 5, 7, 11, and I think 15% total. And as we just talked about, not all concerns are negative. So this does go into something we'll talk about here in a minute, that the support for this project by and large was positive.
I think it was inspiring to see how much positive came out of the meetings and how much positive came out of people coming and talking about it and dreaming together. I think kudos to everyone that participated for doing that, because it made it a very engaging process.
So sitting here and presenting numbers and graphs is, there's not a lot of takeaway from that, perhaps, for some people who aren't graphic oriented. And once you have data, there's just a plethora of ways that you can show that to folks. We thought that it would be important that the data speaks for itself in terms of percentages, how big the piece of pie is. But we as the design team, as much as we tried to approach this task objectively, there were some things that were said that either resonated with the design team, that were just representative of a lot of people having that same comment or similar comments, culturally sensitive. And we wanted to single those out, present those to you. So I am going to read through those. And these are both from our initial tribal meeting with the Clatsop-Nehalem tribe members, as well as public stakeholders. So we'll start with the tribal stakeholders. First one we wrote down as wanting to present on as a standalone comment. The existing building lacks a visual connection to the estuary. Connectivity between people and nature is highly valued in tribal culture. The NECU site was traditionally a place of welcoming and hosting visitors traveling by water. This is the reason the welcoming man faces west. Consider incorporation of a new welcoming figure facing east to greet travelers of today. We want the public to know the history of the site, how our ancestors lived with the land, and to know that we as a tribe are still here. We hope that the site and buildings will be developed in a way that respects tribal values, such as sustainable, minimalistic, and with a strong connection with nature, and isn't done in a false or cartoonish manner. NECUs should be for everyone enjoyed by all in a place where all cultures and walks of life can exist harmoniously together. Our ancestors lived here for millennia. We don't want to show up to be turned away. And the last one from the tribal meeting, we would like to be able to use the site to host other tribes and to hold our traditional ceremonies. From the stakeholder comments, the existing buildings help buffer the park from off-site noise impact, lending to the site's serenity. The food bank should remain. It is critical for the community and highly used. We must respect the tribal history of the site. We don't know exactly what that history is, but we would like to learn about it when experiencing the buildings in the site. The buildings in site should be available to the Cannon Beach community. There are a few places like the existing gym that can accommodate large gatherings of the local community. The spaces should be used to support tourism, local businesses and residents by being used to host community events and exhibitions, as well as for indoor and outdoor recreation. No parking between the buildings and estuary. We can't give homage to the historical and ecological significance of the site while looking through a parking lot. Has the design team discussed options with the city for possibly waiving the parking requirements? Cannon Beach is a walkable town. People will find a place to park as they do now. Parking shouldn't be the driving factor in developing the site. The site needs to be a place of learning and of self-reflection, a place to be discovered and to discover oneself. And lastly, use of the site and building should strike a balance between visitor and local interests. And the last thing here, before I'll turn it over to Jennifer, if you want to say anything to wrap this up, is just to read you our conclusion.
Did we talk about the underrepresented? Is that there?
It is. And that is one thing that's important to note here is that as much as we tried to have the entire community represented by design at these community outreach events, we did feel like there was underrepresentation by the Latinx community, as well as the small businesses. And Bruce can probably speak to the business portion of that. We did try to have meetings before today, and we're not able to conjure up any interest there.
If I can speak to that, I wouldn't categorize it as not an interest, but Jim has been working on trying to schedule times, and we're trying to go ahead and work with your schedules. And so actually Jim and I have corresponded every day in June, trying to go ahead and set up some dates. So we're still working on it and we'll make it happen.
Okay.
I don't know exactly how you folks are going to incorporate the information, but somehow we'll probably need to see that too.
I mean, we're still getting surveys. We got 3 more surveys today, which we were incorporating surveys up until yesterday. We drew the line last night on what came into this packet.
Yeah.
But there, we did receive 3 more surveys today, and then we expect those to still come in, and we'll still filter through those information. And it's not that I want people to know that they still have a voice after today. Although pens will start to be raised, so we can start making designs, but it's good to know that the door is still open for people to comment, including the business community. But I think that those are we did feel that there was that underrepresentation. We had some visitors, not as many as we would hope to have potentially. We did have some. We had some that had been visitors and had just recently moved. We asked them to put their visitor hat on so that we could explore that idea with them.
I remember there is going through on one of the graphs that it was like a 23% response in favor of it was something, and I saw it as being tied to preferences, that sort of thing. But even without the business community, there was a recognition of that, the importance of that in this site.
In our conclusion, I'll read that real quick. It's a short paragraph. In general, in speaking with the public and tribal stakeholders throughout this outreach process, the design team was left with the resounding sentiment that the local community and the Clatsop Nehalem tribe are in support of reactivating the NECU site. Perceived challenges were articulated with most notably being the desire to not have parking between the existing structures and the estuary, on-site and off-site wayfinding, preservation of tribal heritage, and securing sufficient budget to meet the project vision. All of which we will endeavor to further define and resolve with additional community outreach and collaboration with the city moving forward into the next phase. The vast majority of goals and interests expressed by individual stakeholders are largely in sync with one another, lending to a unified vision of neck use as an adaptive, culturally rich gathering place for visitors, locals, and the tribe for a range of group-oriented functions. That is what we heard.
Mr. Mayor, can I just make one presentation? The gentleman that just joined us is Todd Lost. He's a representative of the Clatsop Nehalem Tribal Organization and has been working closely with Dick Bash on the input from the tribe. So he drove down from Seattle, so we appreciate his time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Actually,
Oh, no.
5 minutes out of Seattle. So
Really?
that brought my time was lost.
Okay. Thanks for coming.
But no, not a problem.
What we're trying to get from the council tonight, is there anything, I don't know if you want to say a higher priority that you saw when you were reviewing this information? Is there anything you're saying, no, I don't think that we want to go in that direction from what you saw? And the reason is the next presentation to you will be what we call the program. And so with the kind of things that people are talking about here, you'll see the program, they'll be talking about how spaces, what they will need. For example, the gym is probably the one that's going to have the most flexibility. But, are we going to have I don't know, a big sound stage or something there? Well, probably not that, but yes, you want to be able to have different types of performances. And then the number of people that were asking for meeting space versus museum sort of things. So that's the kind of stuff you'll see and based on what direction we get tonight. And also when we go through, that's the program. Then the program will result in a schematic design or series of schematic designs. There will be input from the public and from the council all the way through this process. And you've seen the way that CETA wants to treat the information that's coming in. I hope this is what you were envisioning in the process, because that's what we're trying to deliver. So this is not if you don't speak tonight, we're done with it. It's not the case. There'll be continuous opportunities.
Well, I'm impressed with the quality of the presentation, the quality of the results. Being able to pull all these diverse comments together and present it in, I think, a very understandable way. I don't think anything's been missed. Some people feel it has been, but I don't. I think it really covered the full range of what can be accomplished at NICUS. And I guess I just look forward to the next edition. And it's once we get into the actual identifying the spaces and how they'll be used, I think I certainly will have more input at that point. But conceptually, I think my perspective captured what the community is interested in and concerned about. And now the challenge is to try to address those and find that balance. So I don't see anything I would add or anything I would take out of what I'm seeing right now, but I just kind of excited to see what comes out of that. So you have a big task ahead of you.
Yes, we do.
I agree with Mike's assessment. I really did appreciate. I liked having everybody's surveys and comments in there. Obviously, I wasn't going to spend the time and go through every one of them. But your synopsis in your color coded points here that have breakdowns in them is what I used to glean what you guys learned. And I think it hits really well. There's a few there that I would be curious to see where we go with. There's 48 items here that were very well stated. There's a few that I would say are repetitive. So I can see that that's going to start finding. Of course, being a designer myself, I immediately started putting pen to paper. But I've done this already. So I guess I tried to recategorize things. Because now that you've set up the way that the comments were made, I was starting to categorize it to the buildings and to the site. And so I found that out of all the listings here that you have, almost half of them relate to a space that would be flexible, capable of doing all kinds of things. And that's a fun place to design. So I'm really looking forward to see where you're going to go with the flexibility part of it. There were several that were conceptual. I think that has primarily with what the tribe comments were. They are overarching. So I really appreciated that area. I would just my own curiosity is to see how those little things broke down. That was a fascinating way to do it. Probably glad you didn't put that in here. Just explain it to us. But I really appreciated that part. Had already gone through the first meeting with the tribes. I thought that was a best notes I've ever seen from a meeting like that. So
The updated presentation is now on the meeting page. If you go to the additional documents, it's on there if you want to see it.
okay.
And are all the exhibits we saw here?
Yes.
Okay.
They're under supporting documents.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful because from here we couldn't see everything and it'll make a lot more sense. But I thought your pie chart was pretty much right on with what my sense of where people landed. So I appreciate that you have spent so much time with the public piece because that was the most important. Good luck.
I think that the reality is not everyone will get everything they want, right? There's going to be give and take. And I think that what we're hoping to do out of this is to make sure that the largest group of the community get the most of what they want. So we try to as broad a spectrum, and there will be people that we know that wish for more or wish for something a little different. But we all know we can't accommodate every wish, but the goal is to get the majority of what was wanted and desired on site. And I would say one of the things that I drove away from COE number 3 is saying, this is a community gathering space. It was a community gathering space for the tribe. It was a community gathering space for the school. And it can be a community now. And I felt that was a really strong impression that I got out of the third one driving away.
I heard a really neat quote just recently. Very simple. What was the opposite of sustainability? Is terminal. So sustainability is important. Want this to last and be a healthy community gathering place, not just a building that we might use it where it's small. We want it to be active. And one of my goals is while you guys are putting pen to paper and starting to design, at the same time, the council is going to start working on how we're going to form the management of the building. And I think that, in a sense, you need to see what you're doing, but you need to see how we're going to do that too. So that's a cooperative goal here.
100%. It's how you manage it will dictate what it can provide. Yeah.
And specifically, how flexible it can be.
You know, as I read through all this and the presentation, I believe that there were three sort of main areas of interest or focus. One was the design. What's it look like? That a lot of people ask that. It may be the, I wouldn't say the least important because you guys are architects, but I mean, as far, it's certainly important. And that's what people.
Engineer.
I don't know how the structure is going to stand up. That's my interest. So really, what's it going to look like? Another area is what's its relationship to the site and the estuary river. And the third is what's going to be inside and how's that going to be structured for flexibility. So it's really, there's what's it look like on the outside? How's it going to be utilized inside? And how does it lie on this site in a way that addresses all these concerns?
Tim, can I ask a question of the council? You're receiving a presentation of the folks that you represent, as counselors, but you are the community leaders. Was there anything in there that you might have thought was underrepresented or that you expected to see more of? Or that when you think about this project, you would have said that probably should have been included? Because we'd like to get everything out on the table now before we start bringing things back. And if you have, if something was missed because somebody didn't show up having the conversation about what might have been important to you, we want to know now instead of possibly giving you a disappointing design because it didn't meet your expectations. So is there anything, or did they nail it? The people that did present, or the people that did come in and give their suggestions?
Well, when we initially had a round of community outreach before we had hired or we were just trying to get some initial public feedback, I'm amazed that all of the stuff that came in was mirrored pretty much.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Mhm.
By what they've collected. And I personally don't have anything that seems to be missed.
The one thing I think I was concerned about is that the tribes wouldn't have enough input, but I feel that really got resolved and is one of the big focal points.
Yeah.
So I really like that.
And so just so everybody else understands, I know I've mentioned this to council, but we're having a meeting tonight and you're seeing it and the public is seeing it. But there were 3 iterations we've gone through. And at the point the staff sees it, the tribe sees it. So we don't want to bring something in that they are saying, how can that possibly be a consideration?
That wasn't what we said. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's actually their point to comment before it becomes public. And that's what we plan on continuing to do. That's why good people like Todd are driving down Seattle to just talk to you all tonight.
I've been really pleased and a bit surprised as to the interest of the tribe. I mean, I've been happy about that. I started talking to Dick Bash years ago as we began to think about what we could do with that site. And to see so many members and representatives of the tribe coming together and really jumping into this with an energy level that I think is amazing. I'm just happy to see that because I think that's what this site is.
Yeah.
It is a gathering place. And of course, we're newcomers, but a representation, understanding of what it is and was so important. And couldn't do that without the tribes,
Sure.
but again, I thank you.
Do you think it's been pretty well covered, what you were?
I think I'm not gonna be critical here, but I think that the tribe's involvement is absolutely necessary.
Mhm.
What I'm more concerned about is folks not believing the tribes are involved.
Yeah.
And trying to push a aesthetic of tribal character that's not even what the tribes want. I think the tribals, the selection of comments that you made from the stakeholders list here covers that really well. And we need to keep that on the forefront so that we know that they are intimately involved in the process and that people don't have to worry about it's not being enough. My feeling is in their fourth comment here that you listed in the last line, it says it isn't done in a false cartoonish. Because I think a lot of folks have seen how it can be done. Too much, it can be overdone. So that's a tricky edge to walk, is how do you make it honest and not cartoonish in their sense. So that's the one concern that I have in that realm. Actually, everything, all of the categories that you've come up with, I think are very pertinent to the whole discussion. If anything, I feel that the certain ones are weighted a little differently just because of the repetitive type things where certain things are repeated. I think once you start squishing it into the spaces and start, doing your bubble drawings and stuff like that, that'll all get washed out, not a problem. Again, to me, the whole thing is sustainable, simple but honest, and flexibility.
I guess I'm still a little bit concerned about the food pantry, what its place is going to be in the overall design. And exactly how, is it going to be part of the design? Is it going to be separate? What is the status of the food pantry there? So I think that's a discussion that the council is probably going to have about that.
Yeah, and actually there's two parts to that discussion. The food pantry can't be part of the project budget.
Right.
So, and we've already talked about doing something separate for the food pantry, including looking at different locations. So the one part is we will be bringing something back for locations and for you all to consider. And if the current site is the favored option, then it will be considered in the overall design. One thing I think is good is that actually did a lot of things good, but the current building will not, it's highly unlikely that the current building will be what's going to be the new food pantry. So if we're not going to have that building there, I think it gives us some more options on how to lay out the site. And so that might be a positive when we get to that point.
You are going to be working with people at the food pantry, right?
How many times do we talk, Barb?
Okay. I
Yeah,
want to make sure, I don't want recommendations for new locations without them
Oh, no.
being totally involved in the process.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, and Todd, can you, or do you want to make any comments as far as the tribe's participation?
Yeah, I just really appreciate to be listened to and very touched about the whole reach. I also wanted to introduce Ginger Erickson. Her father was Joe Scoville, who was kind of a legend. So she'll be getting more and more involved. I can't drive down every day, although I wish he just lived here, but it's much better than. We really appreciate the insight and, the thing that Mayor mentioned about making authentic is key, right? It's not a casino, it's a gathering place. And what does an Indian classroom look like? Well, I bet it looks a lot like, you know, everyone's classroom. It's a place to gather and learn. So we don't want a decorated shed. We want the connection with the landscape is probably the most important thing. We would like to recognize that how much the site's changed to sort of as a piece of topography. A lot of people don't realize that the grass used to be beach and the parking lot used to be longhouses. It's just I don't know what year it was, but they just filled it full of sand and just kind of underneath there is 4, 5, 7 longhouse structures that were kind of buried. So I don't think we should dig out the site. I'm not suggesting that and bring them to restore it, but I think there's some really interesting ways to show history before and after. You know, we're not looking to cast blame, but we're looking for people to understand how things change, how they've been changed. And I think people would just be, you know, blown away that the river used to come up to probably 2/3 of the way out of the grass. And so it's at one time it was just, you know, just a place to live, and now it's kind of sacred, and we hope we can discuss that somewhere in the process. But we really thank the fact that we're involved, and we're going to keep coming down.
I'm gonna kind of add to that, not add to it, but continue with one of the topics that we haven't really addressed tonight. We've got the tribal culture. We've got the town culture of the history of the gym and all that kind of stuff. But another very important part of that site is the environmental aspect. And that was something that we've been key on from the get-go. And in fact, that is a combination of beach, our title, the joint to the trees and all that kind of stuff. So in which the tribes are concerned about, we're also concerned about, and I was just thinking, we've got a good connection to a park right across the creek also that is probably better saved, especially in the Laurel directly across. Yes, we've manipulated that a little bit to put in some reclamation in there, but it's still very natural. And so
And chances are there was probably a longhouse over there as well, I would imagine.
so that we have a little expansion of capability also with Les Shirley Park.
I think one of the interesting little anecdote as I was driving down here, someone called me and I picked it up, risking that could have been someone trying to sell me an extended car warrant. But it was actually somebody from the city saying that I needed to be here tonight. And he said, oh, we should tear down the Quonset hut and build the longhouse. And I thought, well, I appreciate the spirit, but you know, there's a lot of carbon and all that nice wood that makes those arches. And so we're thinking in terms of that. We're not looking to recreate a longhouse village. That's not what we're looking for. And I think it's a few people I've talked to along the way. We're kind of worried that we were going to, you know, recreate the beach and what that cost and the amount of carbon that would go into removing all that sand. That's not at all what we're suggesting. I will say though, I will cut down a couple of trees to make a better place because we're going to plant 4-fold trees, hopefully either here or we've got places, other places through, you know, so hopefully we can kind of zero out our carbon footprint in this process. We have lots of places to plant trees. We've got other properties, but yeah, the ecological thing and just sort of the education of that, and it's just such an amazing, you know, it's not an accident that this tribe sits on the curve of that river. I mean, it's that's up to perfect. You know, you got your ocean transport, you got your creek, you got your, you know, your beavers, and I can't imagine what it was like 1,000 years ago. And if you go up the coast on all the bends to all the creeks, that's what the longhouse villages are at. Go leaving Seaside, right there by Gerhard, our other property, it's like the reverse of that. So those sort of things would be like nice to be represented in either, you know, some sort of historic, you know, like they do boards or, you know, just sort of the history of the place. Would be really great.
Thank you.
And at some point, I'd like to bring something to council for consideration that, you know, we have some great architects and they're getting paid. CMGC will get paid. But we have people that are kind of spread to the wind. And like Todd has been here like 4 times, last 4 trips down from Seattle, finding a place to stay, all those things. So I'm a little uncomfortable saying that we appreciate your information, but it's going to be on your dime. And then also I want to, if that becomes too onerous for the individuals, I really don't want to lose the continuity of their input. So we've asked them to come down. They have been coming down, Dick and Roberta also. So I think that there's, you know, a fairness aspect there that we are getting great value from, you know, their willingness to be part of this. But I just see them coming out of pocket for everything that they do for us.
But I'd be happy if you bring us something.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Good.
Yes.
Do you guys have anything else that you need from us or at this point?
I mean, I think that there's the drilling in piece that you guys have started to dance around, but there are things that ultimately will need decisions on how to proceed, because not everything's going to fit into the building site or budget. I mean, it's just, I mean, and I can pick on one particular item just as an example, but I think when we look at commercial kitchen, teaching kitchen, community kitchen, it's one of those, what are we trying to do? We will need direction on what you guys want, because we heard all of those. And all have amazing attributes for the community, all have facility costs and upkeep. And so I don't think it's for Dustin and I to decide which of, because the voices were fairly similar on that one. So what is the best for the community will be hard for us to be able to tell you. So I think when we start to look at this, there are going to be decisions that we need help with when we're looking at it.
I think if you put those in the form of a question, we can bring them, you know, back to council.
We also have some folks in town that are professionals at that point that operate 2 teaching kitchens at least. So that kind of thing. Get some feedback from them specifically. Because they're aware of the project and I've already talked to them about it. So.
I guess one last point is, let's talk about the food bank. We just don't want to be in a situation where someone thinks that the Beth and Halem's have displaced the food bank. We're pro food bank. We think so. Just
You're covered.
kind of social justice on both ends of the right?
Right.
1,000 years apart. That's
I think that the other thing that really comes to mind is parking and wanting to determine how we want to address parking from a site standpoint or from a community standpoint. And I think that this question from our discussions is much larger than the site. So there's a lot of community beliefs one way or the other on that. And there was, you know, we need to park it. There was, we need to not park it. And so I'm not 100% sure how we take that forward. I think that that's something that we will need assistance on how to navigate what's best for the overall community. Because there was a lot of feeling that there shouldn't be parking on this historical lands.
I think a lot of that we can flesh out during the programming phase. For example, I mean, there will be, we know there's going to be something about a kitchen. Then we'll start talking in detail. What do you expect from that kitchen? Is it a catering kitchen? Is it a, you know, full, the whole thing? So those decisions will come up at those times. Same thing. I think that probably the parking discussion will come up more as we get into design.
I'm concerned about how soon we can do that in order to help these folks. I mean, I don't even know if this council can come to a consensus. Talk about the kitchen and the budget. I'm not at all in favor of a commercial kitchen, you know, to eat up our budget. when I think about the use of that space for the meeting space and event center, I'm very comfortable with a catering kitchen, which I think be very important. Place for the caterers come in and do their prep and have a warming oven and coffee makers. But to go full-blown kitchen with exhaust fans and grease pits and whatever else goes in, that in my mind, that'd be foolish and would eat our budget. So, I mean, but I don't know how the others feel and whether we have to have consensus on that. On the parking, I say absolutely no parking north of the classrooms. We could take a look west, access,
Yeah.
where accessibility or drop off parking or unloading, that sort of
You're
thing.
killing these people right here because you're talking about design and they're like,
Well, no, but
Oh, we're ready to pick up our pens.
pick them up and.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is a work session. We can
Mhm.
start it now.
sure.
We don't, I mean. You brought up, Jennifer brought up two issues
Mhm.
that I think we could certainly talk about. Which would help them begin to put things to paper. The flexibility of the gymnasium space. I think that came through over and over. We've got all these different possibilities and we've got to have flexibility rather than hard form.
Mhm.
How you do that, but that's their job. The classrooms. I guess I'm going to see what to come up with on that, but a dedicated classroom for one use, I think that goes against the flexibility idea. But rooms that can be set up for different kinds of exhibits, small groups, community meetings, smaller business conferences, breakout rooms, a lot of things like that with their audio visual capabilities. Those are things that I look forward to see in the program that comes back to us. There's something that I'm concerned about the budget.
Mhm.
I don't want to spend a lot of money on a lot of extra niceties. I don't know, we need the very best audio visual computer gizmos, but we certainly need to have the capability to meet the needs of a business community that would come in and utilize this event space. So there's a balance there. I think as an event center, we probably need, and especially we're talking about musical type events, we need a better system than we'd need just for a business conference to sit there and have a good speaker system. So those are the kind of things that we need to have addressed here. And I guess I like the idea of you guys saying ask specific points. What do you as a council want to see in this facility? And I've given you a couple ideas, but the others need to do the same thing.
I think the budget concept is what would to prioritize. That would help them a lot. As far as, you know, something like a kitchen would be a very high expense thing. Restrooms are going to be necessary. Nobody, funny thing, never got listed in any of this stuff.
I got one today that had, that said, we need public restrooms on this end. I was like, well, that's a first. That was the first time I came through. And it's the survey today had that.
But a facility like this would need restrooms. Well, that is a built-in priority because you have to have that kind of thing, just like a roof. But there are things that we would be looking at. I can't pick one right off the top of my head, but for the flexible spaces, but the floor of the gym. That is, it could be one material or better material. But is it, which one is more important compared to some other aspect of the design? Again, that I'd like to be able to give you priorities right now, but I don't think we can. I think that's back and forth kind of stuff. Part of the part of the flexibility of the whole project is the gym, the classrooms, but it's also the exterior. Because I keep thinking, I keep hearing no parking north of the no parking out there, but the food bank's going to be using it, so there are going to be cars out there. There could be an outdoor event that's going to be needing cars, or trucks of some kind to just do displays. Maybe if we had an antique car show, who knows? Whatever the events could be, leads what the use of the space could be. So, or actually be quite helpful, I would think, to just know a whole list of events. If we threw out a car show, that would be, Portland Model T Club would come down for a weekend. I'm not big on car shows because it's not a big deal for me, but they're fun to go to. So something like that would require the use of the blacktop for vehicles. I'm not saying it's parking, but it could be.
One of the things that was talked about in our first meeting with the tribe that I thought was interesting to me, and the takeaway that I had was that what's there preserves what's underneath. And so if we start disturbing what's there, then we start exposing things to other issues that they currently don't have with that exposure. That people could come looking for artifacts. So there was some, I guess, relief on my side about what's there. There wasn't this is horrible, we need to return it to the way it was. It was that what's there actually at this time, this many years later, serves a purpose to protect. And I thought that was an interesting takeaway that I had.
Another part of the flexibility that I keep thinking about is also future evolution. Because if we took a space and we created a catering kitchen, if the space allowed for expansion sometime in the future, that's the kind of thing that happens naturally. So pre-planning some of that is challenging, but it would be really nice, especially when we've got a limited budget.
As you guys look at the landscaping and the exterior at the site, I think it's a good point addressing the asphalt that's there now. Should that remain? Solve some problems? Should it be scraped back, which may or may not create a problem archaeologically, certainly an expense to that. But if you look at the site itself, I guess I'm looking for some options on that asphalt portion. Does it make sense to keep it there? Is it more aesthetically pleasing to remove it or leave some portion of it? I mean, that's something I think you need to address.
And one thing that I think about we don't know what the future for the food bank is at this location versus other locations versus modeling this location. I'm not sure all the options on the table. That makes that whole conversation even a little more unique because we don't, that's a piece of the puzzle that's not necessarily within our box of the puzzle pieces. So trying to figure out how that integrates in and what it looks like. I think when we look from a site master plan, we can certainly look at what it looks like with the food bank at the location and what the food bank was not at the location, which might help that process. But ultimately, it will be a direct impact into the site, to your point of where they're using it now, if it gets used the same way or if we look at using it differently. But it definitely, that particular building really blocks a lot of the vistas out of the site.
Talking a little bit about artifacts a minute ago. I had been in conversation with Doug Dewar, and he is putting together a proposal to do some archaeological review that it's kind of got started quite a while ago, but it hasn't been moving forward because COVID and other things. So we will have a proposal for that. And he's trying to do it this summer, which will be before any work is actually being done on the site. So anyway, we'll be bringing that to you at some point. Pardon?
Or scanning.
Yeah, yeah.
Has there been any LiDAR exploration in that area?
They did some ground penetrating radar.
Yeah.
There has been, and they've detected where they kind of have a better idea where they think things are, but they want to go to ground two with some better equipment. And that's, I think, what.
Yeah.
um,
More detail.
And about the asphalt, I think, it's kind of a Pandora's box a little bit. And I don't know if you've seen the old aerial photographs. I saw it on that rainy day we came down, and I was like blown away about how much has been, brought back. So it's not like the lawn is pristine and has never been far from it. You can still see the where it is at. But I think it would be an opportunity to talk about how where does the water from the asphalt go to, and how we might become the best places in, Seaside Cannon Beach. This is all about the best parking lot on the coast, about how it drains and gets, because it goes right into the creek, and the creek goes right, and so, and as we all know, it's an issue. It's a huge issue right now with tires and salmon and everything. So I think that would be something that would be good for everybody, and philosophy of the truck.
And in talking about the budget, I'm tracking that. And I think that, we started at 5.5. We borrowed 4.6. And out of the 4.6, we will be paying for the classroom roof, the seismic work that's in the gym and in the classrooms. Architectural contract, the CMGC contract. And there's some other big things in there, but in my mind, we're probably about 1.7 million when we get done with those costs. And so can't do the number, maybe it's 3.8 or whatever it is what it might potentially be available for improvements. The other things I kind of see is either background or whatever, but those are just the things that have to be done. And then it's probably about 3.8 or something available to do things. So I wouldn't take those numbers to the bank, but I'm just trying to give you an order of magnitude. Yeah, no, but I'm trying to give you an order of magnitude because when we're talking how much, if we could say, okay, well, it's a $5 million budget or something, but we're committed to doing like about 1.7 from that at least. So and possibly as high as 2.
Let me also mention, last night, we talked about the gym roof. We had a contract for totally redoing that. Decided to pull back so that these folks can be more creative with what we might want to do with the building and think the roof as part of it rather than having the roof already done. Just so you know, we had that scheduled to be done this summer. It's now going to be postponed a little bit to see whether we get some fresh new ideas about it. And I'm hoping we do, because I think the roof is a unique aspect of that whole building. Is the whole building. So
I find an aspect that's not roof.
that's kind of interesting. But it gives them some flexibility. Obviously a word I like in their design process. Okay, what can we help with here?
I really would like to get some things decided about the food bank. And so do you have a time frame for that? Because that would sure help with all of their planning, so they don't have to have plan A and plan B. They can just work with what I hope we can come up with.
And do we have that scheduled for the July workshop?
On the July workshop.
July workshop.
Okay, good.
If there's any comments from the public?
Sure, now that you've all heard stuff about what we've been talking about, what they've presented, obviously they're here to learn from us. So if anybody else has any comments online or online or in-house, you're welcome. Sure, let's come on up.
Thank you. Biting my tongue back there. I was hoping to get a chance to chat. Les Sinclair, PO Box 1394. First of all, I think the process has been fantastic. Thank you so much. Sounds to me like we're headed about the right direction. The thing that I kind of wanted to ask about though is in your feedback, it seemed like there were concerns, specific concerns of individuals. And I wondered, how did you intend to address those? I think that it seems to me that one of the maybe problems we've had in the past is people have expressed concerns but didn't get any feedback, any answers. I mean, all the positive stuff's great, and I think we're headed the right direction, but there are some concerns. There were cost concerns, maybe there were design concerns. I think that we should try to put some kind of a response if we can, maybe on the website, whatever, just so folks know that we did hear them speaking to us.
Good point, Les.
Yeah. Anyway, again, I think it's great. And I'm 100% behind the project. But I do want folks to feel good about their participation, even if they didn't love it.
Well, that's just helpful with some of the events that we've had. He and his wife, Lynn.
Yeah, Lynn's back there.
Yeah, they were great helping.
I've noticed a lot of the concerns were, I don't want it like this. There's some aspect that really isn't even in the concept so far. They just wanted to make sure it didn't happen. But I agree, there are a few in there that are concerns that we need to address. And
That might be a good place to at least start answering those concerns, would be the community bulletin probably.
Okay.
And I don't have any other suggestions at the moment, but at least get started.
anybody else? Come on. Okay. Yeah.
Oh my God, okay, I haven't been here for a while.
It helps us to record it.
Hi.
I'm just this way back. I've been here since, or I moved here in the 80s and then moved to the Big Island, but just excited about this project, being back here more full time and just you guys put it together really well. And I think everybody's trying to be heard, from all sides of the situation. But I have one thing that comes to mind when it's all done and we've all decided what it's going to be used for, or like, this is maybe jumping too much ahead, but how is that process of, how is it going to be used and who is authorizing that? Like, to say it's going to be a business meeting or it's going to be a art facility thing, who are the public going to get that permission, or how is that process going to work? Where
That one there's,
Look to us.
yeah, they'll come to us and as Sam said, we're already, we're going to be at the same time working through what the management system might be like. But I just see that there has to be some sort of a talented, active manager to make the most use and create the greatest benefit for the folks that are here.
Okay.
There will be somebody that is probably in you won't come to the city hall every time and you won't go to the council every time. There'll be a management system
Okay, that's
set
what I
up.
was wondering about.
Yeah.
And we'll want to set up rules and guidelines and schedules, and stuff like that, so that it has a very open and easy way to use the facility, both for events of commercial sense as well as for city gatherings, community social events, I think. So the idea is not limited to anything, but it's got to be managed. So somehow.
So it's outside of you guys, it's like its own separate entity.
I would think for the operations, it would be a separate entity in that sense. It is city property. It is our funding that's going into it. But it'd be like with the way we contract with the guys who clean up the streets. We would contract with somebody or some organization. Again, we haven't hammered this out yet, but somehow there will be an independent sense. Who's saying who gets to do what in that space?
I was curious about that. And I think the food pantry too, I've been participating in that, and that's just something to think about. I haven't been here long enough, so I don't know if there's other places to, hold that space or where it was before, but yeah, we'll think about that. So. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Mary. Super. SIEBERT.
There's something that comes to mind that and not exactly related to what she was just talking about, but that I do want to bring up is that, when we looked at this and we distilled it and we didn't want the loudest voices to get all the words, but we wanted to make sure it was a very equitable process. But one thing that we've read it all, and you can read it all, and there is little gems that only occur once. That doesn't mean that those little gems aren't important, and it is our job to bring those forward. So like to your point about the public toilet rooms, that was one thing that, was only brought up once, but maybe that is something that's important. At least we should explore if that's something that's wanted in that area and so forth. So I think that although there's this very weighted system, which makes it equitable, we also understand that we have to read everything. And every once in a while, there's just this little piece of silver that we need to pull out and bring to the top and say, one person thought differently than all the rest of us when they had this idea, and at least bring it to you guys. And that's something that we will make sure happens to the best of our ability, that those little silver linings that we might find.
That's one of the best parts about getting community input, is because you get ideas that really are out of there sometimes, and they're really good.
I've heard some amazing stories about the 1950s. But I mean, I think that the stories bring great value as they progress into like the visions of those stories.
And just a technical note, when we talk about the restrooms, is the fact that if they are restrooms that can be used in a general sense without being connected to the rest of the facility, so the folks at the food pantry have that availability to those restrooms, as well as people off the beach or something like that.
We do have.
I know you have one, but here'd be more. So it's just that sense that any sort of activity that's just outside and not using the building would have access to the restroom. Is a technical point.
Yeah, it does raise a whole new level of concern. Managing public restrooms is not a small task.
Right. Well, and that's something that I think that we ultimately will need guidance about, because I assume there's different kitties that take care of different things. So if someone's renting the facility and they rent the space, they would pay for that, but then potentially that's, like a different area that has to maintain it. It does that attribute because it's next to the beach make a difference? Is that something that's needed over there? Or that's something that's not? I don't think we can value that, but we can give it to you as a prioritization list. And I think that my point in that is just that sometimes the one-off we don't want to dismiss the one-off. We want to make sure, I mean, to the best of our ability, if there's something that just was unique and different, we want to bring that to your attention too.
One of those gems that you mentioned, that an idea that I didn't see repeated at all, but was the idea of having a bus stop there. And I thought, the point, I mean, this is going to be a facility to help with tourists. And I thought, if we could come up with some kind of an agreement with the folks that run the point, the bus that goes from Portland to Cannon Beach, if they could have a bus stop there, that would be a great place. I think it'd be a great place and then also for the local buses as well. Help a little with parking, but not a whole lot, but a little.
Okay. This was, I think, an awesome first effort. But as we were just having the conversations now, there's a lot of decisions yet to be made. And we will just be coming to you as frequently as we need to. And Jen or Rusty, do you recall the next meeting date
For council?
for council for, yeah,
July.
6.
okay. And that was when we were talking about the program and we're talking about, well, can we really complete the program or do we come with a series of questions? That sort of thing to keep things moving forward.
We couldn't make that July 7th, could we?
You're all at the boss. You can.
The reason I ask is opening night for Coaster Theater. I just thought I'd ask.
Council meeting. Yeah, well, you can come over on the 6th.
Yeah, but that's the one that I have to.
No. Todd was just saying he would come to the theater too.
Oh, okay.
Justin just said, we met on my birthday for the first COE, so we can meet on his birthday.
Yeah, yeah, and then we'll do Kelly's birthday up there.
So which day are you proposing?
Well,
Let me check my calendar. I think it's the 7th.
is it realistic or feasible for us to send prioritization information to you guys and have you potentially look at it and maybe number that priority so we can get it back? And then we can either prior to that, if not, then at that, be able to focus in on the ones that you guys are different on. Does that make
Great.
that so? Because hopefully that'll isolate like, hey, we have 7 priorities, but we have 2 wildly different kitchen ideas. So how do we want to?
Yeah. I think that if council is willing to entertain another meeting, I would recommend that we, even if it's over Zoom, but I'd love to have you guys come here, that we have a middle term meeting to talk about what those questions might be as they're working towards putting together the program. Because just getting a series of priorities, what Robin's 1 might be somebody else's 4 or that kind of thing. And do you do averaging or whatever? But I think that but when they show up, there will be a discussion about all that. So what I'd like to do is put the discussion in there someplace rather than holding off on the discussion and going from a math, it's kind of a math exercise. So if we could try to schedule some time, I would like to try to do it that way. I think that the more time we spend together, the better the product is going to be.
Well, we have a meeting on the 21st. There's only one item on that meeting.
Mhm.
We have 3 resolutions and we're going to do Lori's quarterly report.
And we have executive session.
At 5.
5 o'clock, yes.
Oh, okay, I just threw that out.
Anyway, we would need to schedule something. But that would be my recommendation.
But the 4 are meetings in July. Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part, Brandon.
The extra meeting that you're proposing, do you want it to occur before our meetings in July?
Yes, okay, good.
I think that the hope that I understand from Bruce and that we would like is that that would give us more direction to move forward and finish our programming and move on to the next phase.
Yeah, because this was a very broad brush.
It's a lot of information. I mean, it's 120 pages or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of detail yet. And that's what you need to work with.
How soon could you put together your list of items that you would like to have some prioritization for?
Within this
End of the week at the latest.
end of the week. Yeah, very first next week. Give me time to look at whatever he puts together. But yeah, within a week, if not sooner.
So did we agree that we could do July 7th instead of July 6th?
Well, right now, we're talking about something in between. that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wait,
Working on.
I'm okay with the seventh.
I am too.
We can, let's confirm that.
Yeah.
Is the seventh okay with everybody here?
Fine with me.
Can you guys work for that one? Okay,
That's already in your schedule.
that, we'll just confirm the seventh
Mhm.
as the new meeting time for that one. But sometime in between, which would be the week of the 19th to the 25th or the 26th, to the 30th. That's gives us some sort of time to discuss some stuff, get it back to you.
I think Sam, it would have to be the week of the 19th. Because the next week you're going into the 4th of July weekend and some other things and they need.
Do the 23rd.
Well, it sounded like they could have their list to us prior to even the next Tuesday's work session.
Yeah, the 23rd has planning commission at 2 p.m.
Oh, okay.
We got a heavy work session, don't we?
Jen,
What?
we pared back the workshop some for the 14th, right?
Yeah, I have it, the packet will actually go out tomorrow morning. Let me just give you a quick overview and I can tell you what we have. We have a couple budget resolutions that we've talked about a little bit before about the steps that you're gonna make to change things. There's a budget resolution changing the RV park, so then the water resiliency project phase 1 project award, Western Oregon Waste is gonna come and give an overview of their rates, and we're gonna introduce the lifeguards and information aids. So I mean, it is fairly light.
We could add something to that meeting.
Could we join that one
Yeah,
through Zoom and join you that way? And
Sure.
Mhm.
so the 14th?
yeah, but you're going to be conducting the meeting. I mean, I'm serious. Yeah, no, okay, but that's,
You can.
okay, yeah. Okay. I wasn't looking at you, I was looking at him.
Yeah, I mean, that gives us. But we turn the stuff around, you'll have some stuff in front of you and then we can really talk about it. That would help us a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, that works. Problem solved.
Yay.
I like doing that. Okay. Anything else?
I want to thank these folks and I want to thank everybody that's out there because I've seen you at least 2 out of the 3 or sessions and I hope you're pleased with the process and we are excited about the project and I hope you are too.
And actually, I'll add to that. This process that these folks have trained us on now, I hope that we will replicate it when we start talking about City Hall.
Yeah.
It's a very detailed process, but it works for getting the word out and getting input back.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, go to the order.
Meeting date. I see Jim is here.
Yay.
We asked you to bring your calendars. And Jen, for what date were we?
We were getting date ideas from council. We didn't have any ideas at this time.
Yeah, we told Jim that we would get him dates that worked for you.
And so at the 14th, before the 14th isn't a big deal.
We will work around it. It might, if anything was to change, it would require a budget amendment of some kind, and we can do those.
Okay.
It would have been nice to have gotten it earlier, but we can make it go.
So as far as we're concerned, the budget for the chamber will continue the way it's been proposed and
That's the way that it's in the budget now.
and can we ask Jim if he has any concerns about that?
Sure.
Jim, do you? Yeah.
That's exactly what you're asking.
Yeah.
Meeting?
Well, concerned about the budget in that we'll be approving it and then anything that might come up, we'd need to do a special
Well, the budget's pretty straightforward in the contract, so,
and you're okay with.
yeah, if there's some change to the contract, then I would want to have discussions about that, but what I understood is that you wanted a presentation of what's going on with the DMO program before the budget meeting as it called for in the contract. So we were trying to get those dates to you before the 14th, which apparently don't work for you, the 4 different times we were looking at. And so we're trying to come up with a date that does work so we can present to you and that the board can be present as much as possible, because that's what Bruce has asked for.
Is there any date that you want to suggest?
I think my biggest challenge with the timings were all during the day. It needs to be an evening. Because I'm in the gallery the whole time. I can't.
Yeah, that's generally why, they were willing to make those special times because it was to get those dates before the 14th. I think they were willing to make adjustments to the time. Of course, they all have businesses to run as well, as you know. A lot of those hotels check-ins at 4 or restaurants are doing their evening stuff. So evenings are difficult for them. That's why our meetings are typically 8 in the morning. Work. So that's kind of the flip side of your guys' meetings, but I know that the board will be willing to make it work.
I can do the morning. That wouldn't be a problem. But I don't know how everybody else feels.
I think anything other than this week and early next week would be good for my staff because it's of course that's a week. And the timing of this is very difficult for the chamber because we had Fat Bike, Sandcastle, and now the 4th of July in a 7-week period. So we're busy working and planning pretty major events for our community. I'll coordinate with Bruce after this one, future wise, to make sure that we're on top of those so that it comes at a point of the year for everybody, hopefully. But if you guys want to pick the dates that work best for you and the times, I can take it up to the board and get it very important for us. Union contract, and they acknowledge that. We were just trying to be expedite and be quick to reach the 14th date, which was that you guys needed to have.
And if we could have had by the 14th, that would have been not working.
What do you got? Something to throw out there?
Well, can people do it in the morning?
I had made myself available to every single one of the dates proposed. And
I did too.
I'd be more than happy to work with their schedule. I'm not seeing where the problem is.
So who couldn't?
Raise your hand if you can't do it.
Well, they were all tough for me.
Okay,
Being at the noon hour for the gallery was just awkward. A morning would work.
all right. I'm more than happy to work with that.
So
So are you guys thinking June or July?
well, June, probably. Wait, as soon as possible.
Can, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, how about,
Now that we have the budget meeting on the 21st, isn't that a date that,
Well, it's an evening meeting and we have a 5 o'clock session.
I'm not saying the same time, I'm just saying before the 21st in case changes.
Sure. If you all want
how about next Wednesday?
That
15th.
Well, they have the chamber meeting at 8.
That's our board meeting.
Your board meeting? There you
I'm here.
will be, I'll be there.
Can we meet? When does it start?
Our board meeting starts at 8. That's a pretty heavy meeting. I'm gonna ask more and see if they want to make it work after that, but I think that's gonna be a big meeting for us.
That was fixed.
I can't do the 15th. I got 3 things already scheduled for that.
Oh, how about next?
think it's anytime after that.
Yeah, the 17th would work, or the 20th would work.
17th is Sunday?
No,
No, it's
if
Friday.
it's this month, it's Friday.
Normally have meetings on Fridays, but. Yeah,
Okay.
Well, I can do it the 17th, the 20th is coffee with the counselors, so I don't know if we want to,
We could do it before then.
well, it depends on how long it's going to take.
How about after? Well, that would,
I can't do it after. I have
oh,
library desk.
We have TAC at noon that day.
anybody not able to do the 17th?
What time? I just have something at 9:30.
Morning sounded. fine for board. For the chamber folks.
I think at any time at this point would, I mean, we had a couple of options for that day, maybe a morning and an evening. And we could see which were better for most people.
Okay.
Might be a way to answer that.
Do that, Ken.
yeah, yeah.
Say the 17th and you guys figure out the time, just as long as it's not. Middle of the day.
Let's say 8 AM or 6 PM. So.
Yeah.
Our scheduler.
Okay.
Whichever works for the most people.
Can we have breakfast if we do that?
Yeah, at least coffee, if not.
Say if it's 6 o'clock, we have an open bar.
Right. For that time frame.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do that.
Yep.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Anybody else, got anything for the good of the order? Or
Yeah, we noticed that the one that we sent over, there's a couple errors that were picked up, so we sent the wrong one, so we'll have that first thing in the morning, so that it'll be uploaded on the city website with the correct version. So we'll have that.
Okay.
Just as an FYI, we wanted to make sure we have the most current piece to you guys, and we see that we don't. So,
just make sure Rusty knows what he's doing.
yeah, he's him and I.
At that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.